Howdy folks, Brother Jim reporting here from the United States Department of Justice, and End Times Prophecy News is me. Today's report, April 9th, on what is the Department of Justice doing? Well, we have a big one here. Univar USA Incorporated to pay US $62.5 million to resolve allegations that it evaded $36 million in anti-dumping duties on imported Chinese saccharin. Univar USA, a subsidiary of Univar Incorporated of Downers Grove, Illinois, has agreed to pay the United States $62 million to settle allegations under the customs penalty statute that it was grossly negligent when it imported 36 shipments of transshipped saccharin between 2007 and 12. The saccharin was manufactured in China and shipped through Taiwan to evade 329% anti-dumping duty that applied to saccharin from China. The anti-dumping duty was a remedial measure in response to injuries sustained by the domestic saccharin industry by reason of dumping of Chinese saccharin. The transshipment resulted in the evasion of approximately $36 million in anti-dumping duties. Transshipment of merchandise through third countries to evade anti-dumping duties undermines the integrity of our trade laws and puts domestic manufacturers at risk from unfairly traded merchandise, said Assistant Attorney General Jody Hunt for the Department of Justice's Civil Division. We enforce our laws against importers who fail to take all reasonable steps to vet their suppliers and determine the true country of origin of their merchandise. And you will read the rest if you like. We continue in U.S. participant in Costa Rican call center pleads guilty for role in sweepstakes fraud aimed at elderly. Boy, there's a lot of corruption in Costa Rica. A U.S. citizen who resided in Costa Rica pleaded guilty today for his role in a sweepstakes fraud scheme that defrauded hundreds of U.S. residents, many of them elderly. Assistant Attorney General Brian A. Benskowski of the Justice Department's Criminal Division, U.S. Attorney, and so on. We continue here. Down here, Thomas Sniffen, 58, pleaded guilty today before U.S. Magistrate Judge David C. Kiesler of the Western District of North Carolina to all 31 counts of an indictment charging 1 count of conspiracy to commit mail and wire fraud, 2 counts of mail fraud, 13 counts of wire fraud, 1 count of conspiracy to commit international money laundering, and 14 counts of international money laundering. Sniffen was charged by indictment in September of 2015 and was extradited from Costa Rica in July of 2017. As part of his guilty plea, Sniffen admitted that from approximately September 2010 through May 2014, he worked for a call center in Costa Rica that placed telephone calls to U.S. victims, falsely informing those victims that they won a substantial cash prize in a sweepstakes. I bet you probably got one of these. The victims, many of whom were elderly, were told that in order to receive the prize, they had to pay for a purported refundable insurance fee. Sniffen admitted Sniffen knew that the certain factual assertions that he and his co-conspirators made in their pitches to victims were false. He also admitted that he and his co-conspirators kept the victims' funds, never provided any prizes to victims, and used the victims' funds to continue operating the call center for his and his co-conspirators' benefit. Once Sniffen and his co-conspirators received the victims' money, they allegedly contacted the victims again to tell them that they had to send additional money to pay for new purported fees, duties, and insurance to receive a new, now larger sweepstakes prize. Sniffen and his co-conspirators allegedly continued their attempts to collect additional money from victims until those victims either ran out of money or discovered the fraudulent nature of the scheme. Yikes. Guess that didn't work out for him. Department of Justice announces the First Step Act implementation today. Well, actually, this is April 8th, pardon me. Today, the Department of Justice's National Institute of Justice, in accordance with the First Step Act, has announced a selection of the nonprofit and nonpartisan Hudson Institute to host the Independent Review Committee. The committee, whose members will be appointed by the Hudson Institute in accordance with the Act's requirements, will assist the department as its develops and implements risk and need assessment tools and evidence-based recidivism reduction programs. Reduction of our government would be great. The Department of Justice is committing to implementing the First Step Act, said Attorney General William Barr. The Independent Review Committee plays an important role in that effort by assisting in the development of a new risk and needs assessment system and improvements to our recidivism reduction program. I am grateful to Hudson Institute for hosting this important committee, which will lead to better policies at the department and ultimately better outcomes for prisoners re-entering society. You can read the rest here, and we continue into insulation contractor branch manager pleads guilty to bid rigging and fraud. April 8th. Gary DeVoe, branch manager for the New England division of the insulation contractor, pleaded guilty today in Bridgeport, Connecticut for his role in schemes to rig bids and engage in fraud on installation contracts, marking the first conviction in this investigation, the Department of Justice announced. According to court documents from at least as early as October 2011 and continuing until as late as March 2018, DeVoe of Bethlehem, Connecticut, conspired with other installation contractors to rig bids and engage in fraud on insulation contracts in Connecticut, New York, and Massachusetts. Installation contractors install insulation around pipes and ducts on renovation and new construction projects at universities, hospitals, and other public and private entities. In addition to his guilty plea, DeVoe has agreed to pay restitution. Good. And you know where all that money was going to that? From the taxpayers, to all those hospitals, those schools, universities, and other public-private entities. Today's conviction is the result of a coordinated effort between the Department of Justice and our law enforcement partners to root out collusion and fraud that undermined the competitive process and defrauded hospitals, schools, and other victims out of millions of dollars, said Assistant Attorney General Machen Dalriam of the Department of Justice's Antitrust Division. Contractors who conspire to deceive and defraud their customers will be prosecuted. Draining swamp. That's what the new DOJ, headed up by Attorney General Bill Barr, is doing. We continue. Standard Chartered Bank admits to illegally processing transactions in violations of Iranian sanctions and agrees to pay more than $1 billion. Iranian national indicted and former SCB employee pleaded guilty for criminal conspiracy to violate Iranian sanctions. Standard Chartered Bank, a global financial institution headquartered in London, England, has agreed to forfeiture of $240 million, a fine of $480 million, and to the amendment and extension of its deferred prosecution agreement with the Justice Department for an additional 2 years for conspiring to violate the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEEPA. This criminal conspiracy, lasting from 2007 through 2011, resulted in SCB processing approximately 9,500 financial transactions worth approximately $240 million through U.S. financial institutions for the benefit of Iran entities. Assistant Attorney General Brian Benskowski of the Justice Department Criminal Division and these other attorneys made the announcement. The New York County District Attorney's Office, DANY, is also announcing today that the SCB has agreed to amend its DPA and DANY and extend for 2 additional years and to pay an additional financial penalty of $292 million under the amendment DPA with DANY. SCB has admitted that it's violated New York state law by, among other things, falsifying the records of New York financial institutions. The SCB has also entered into separate settlement agreements with the U.S. Department of Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control, the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, the New York State Department of Financial Services, and the United Kingdom's Financial Conduct Authority, under which SCB shall pay additional penalties no more or totaling more than $477 million. The Justice Department has agreed to credit a portion of these related payments and, after crediting, will collect $52 million of the fine in addition to SCB's $240 million forfeiture. And the final report for April 8th and part of it is today, the 9th. Just came in. Federal indictments and law enforcement actions in one of the largest healthcare fraud schemes involving telemedicine and durable medical equipment marketing executives results in charges against 24 individuals responsible for over $1.2 billion in losses, draining that swamp out of America. Hundreds of thousands of elderly and or disabled patients nationwide and abroad lured into a criminal scheme. Center for Program Integrity, Center for Medicare Services, takes administrative action against 130 DME companies that submitted over $1.7 billion. One of the largest healthcare fraud schemes investigated by the FBI and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services offices of the Inspector General and prosecuted by the Department of Justice resulted in charges against 24 defendants. Boy, Bill Barr's not doing anything. Joke. Including the CEOs, COOs, and others associated with 5 telemedicine companies, the owners of dozens of durable medical equipment companies, and 3 licensed medical professionals for their alleged participation in healthcare fraud schemes involving more than $1.2 billion in loss, as well as the execution of over 80 search warrants in 17 federal districts. In addition, the Center for Medicare Services, Center for Program Integrity, announced today that it took adverse administrative action against 130 DME companies that had submitted over $1.7 billion in claims and were paid over $900 million. Today's enforcement actions were led and coordinated by the Healthcare Fraud Unit of the Criminals Division's Fraud Section in conjunction with its Medicare Fraud Strike Force, as well as the U.S. Attorney's Office for the districts of South Carolina, New Jersey, and Middle District of Florida. Boy, are we starting to save money now in America, making America great, one day at a time. The charges announced today targeted an alleged scheme involving the payment of illegal kickbacks and bribes by DME companies in exchange for referral medical care beneficiaries by medical professionals working with fraudulent telemedicine companies for back, shoulder, wrist, and knee braces that are medically unnecessary. Some of the defendants allegedly controlled an international telemarketing network that lured over hundreds of thousands of elderly and or disabled patients into a criminal scheme that crossed borders involving call centers in the Philippines and throughout Latin America. The defendants allegedly paid doctors to prescribe DME either without any patient interaction or with an only a brief telephonic conversation with patients that had never met or seen. No wonder why Obama said Donald Trump could never create all the jobs that he said he was going to do, because there was so much corruption that Obama brought into America by not enforcing the laws and going against those good people. He figured it'd be destroyed, that Donald Trump would never succeed. But he was wrong, as all the devils in hell are always wrong. Thank you for listening. That is today's report as of 5 p.m. April 9th on the Department of Justice website. May the Lord bless you. Let me be serious with you. I would rather that you donate to my ministry directly. I cannot survive financially to keep this ministry and new service going without your help. And we all know their plans to shut me down again. But many of you would like to receive a gift or product as a token of my appreciation. And I don't blame you. Isn't it about time Uncle Sam started paying you instead of you paying him? It is about time. The federal government pays you your rent check. The government rents out thousands of buildings instead of buying them every year. This is all funded by the current $11.1 billion building fund in our budget. Get your free federal rent check today. Sign up with the Federal Millionaire information here down below. Become a shareholder to receive federal rent checks for life by making a one-time investment as a shareholder. An IRS ruling declares this to be totally legal. This is no joke, no scam, and been for many years. The longer your name is on the distribution list, the larger your federal rent check grows. As inflation rises along with real estate, the government pays you more every year. Starting out as little as $1,800 a month would be your rent check. Wouldn't that be nice to receive every month a rent check like that? The federal government continues to raise your income as inflation rises. This puts an end to retiring with a fixed income that leaves you going broke as you get older. This will put a major dent in those people who hate their home taxes going up every year, wouldn't it? And folks, the price for this valuable information will cost you only $39 a year or $79 for a 2-year membership. Sign up today.